taught the Crusades were about territory, but I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. They weren't. They were about the Cathars. In the 1200s, this group realized the physical world was a plastic imitation and a prison that was built by a lesser god. After finding that out, they simply stopped playing the game. They were the original sovereigns, and the system had to invent state-sponsored inquisition just to stop their teachings from spreading. Oh yeah, and if you're interested in learning more about Gnosticism and other mystery traditions like Kabbalah, Hermeticism, and Rosicrucianism, make sure to hit the link in my bio to request some information because the doors to the inner sanctum are opening for a limited time very soon. So if you're interested, click the link. Now that you're ready for the full story, let's start with who the Cathars were. So the Cathars flourished in southern France from the 11th to 13th centuries. They were the last major Gnostic movement in Europe, teaching openly that the material world was created not by the true God, but by Rex Mundi, or the king of the world, a demiurgic entity who built this realm as a prison for souls. They refused to own property, recognizing that attachment to matter strengthened the archonic grip. They abstained from meat and animal products, believing that consumption of flesh-bound consciousness more deeply to material experience. They also rejected marriage and procreation, seeing that reproduction is one of the Arkan's methods of perpetuating the soul trap through endless reincarnation. Now, of course, the Catholic Church labeled them heretics, but the Cathars weren't confused Christians. They were Gnostics who understood that the God of the Old Testament, the creator of this world, was not the true divine source, but a lesser deity maintaining a false creation. Now, the history is fascinating, but let's get specific and talk about the Consolamentum, because this is where it gets crazy. So this is the Cathar initiation ritual, also known as the Consolamentum, like I mentioned before, and it was their master key to escaping the reincarnation cycle. The ceremony involved laying on hands by a perfectee or an advanced initiate, which they believe completely severed the soul's connection to material existence and the karmic wheel. Once you received the Consolamentum, you were considered saved regardless of what happened to your body. The ritual didn't just prepare you for a better afterlife, it fundamentally altered your ontological status, disconnecting your consciousness from the archonic system that would normally capture souls at death and force them back into bodies. This is why the Cathars who received the Consolamentum showed no fear during their executions. They had already unplugged from the Matrix. Physical death was just removing a costume they no longer identified with. The Inquisitors could burn the body, but the soul was already free. And that's pretty crazy, but the Consolamentum is just the beginning. Let's go deeper. Some Cathars practice the Endora, a ritualized fast unto death undertaken after receiving the Consolamentum. Having disconnected from the reincarnation system through the ritual, they would voluntarily leave the body through gradual cessation of eating, refusing to generate more karma or attachment that might re-anchor their consciousness to material existence. Modern scholars debate whether the Endora was common practice or a rare extreme, whether it was voluntary spiritual practice or was it imposed by social pressures. Church records accuse the Cathars of ritual suicide, but Cathar defenders, they argued that it was a conscious exit from a prison they'd recognized as false. Now, the practice horrified Catholic authorities because it demonstrated complete rejection of their theological framework. To the church, life was sacred, the body was a temple, and suicide was a mortal sin. The Cathars said, this world is a trap, the body's a cage, and the conscious exit is liberation. And this all leads up to the Albigensian Crusades. So in 1209, Pope Innocent III launched a crusade not against Muslims in the Holy Land, but against fellow Christians in southern France. The Albigensian Crusade wasn't about territory or politics, though. It was theological extermination. The Cathars' teachings threatened the church's entire cosmology and their whole power structure, so it was really important. Now, if the material world is a prison, the church's sacraments would mean nothing. If the creator God is false, then the church's authority would dissolve. If enlightenment comes through gnosis rather than faith, priests become obsolete. The Cathars had to be destroyed, not because they were wrong, but because if they were right, Christianity as practice was serving the demiurge. The siege of Montélimar in 1244 became a legendary one. 200 Cathars, surrounded by crusading forces, refused to renounce their beliefs. When the fortress fell, they walked into a massive pyre singing hymns, choosing death over betraying the gnosis that they'd received through the Consolamentum. Now, the chroniclers noted with bewilderment that the Cathars showed no fear, no resistance, and no attempts to escape. They walked into the flames voluntarily because they genuinely believed that they were walking out of prison, that burning the body was the final step in their liberation. And unfortunately, the horrors go even farther than that. The Cathars couldn't be defeated through military crusade alone. Their teaching spread through conviction from person to person, threatening to convert entire regions. So the church invented a new mechanism, and that was the Papal Inquisition. Now, this wasn't random persecution. It was systematic extraction and elimination of knowledge. Inquisitors didn't just execute Cathars, they forced them to reveal other believers, to expose the network, to identify which families harbored Gnostic teachings. The goal was erasing the transmissions completely. Now, the Inquisition unfortunately succeeded. By the early 1300s, Catharism as an organized movement was extinct. The last known perfecti was burned in 1321. The gnosis they carried, the specific practices, the complete cosmology, and the exact ritual of the consolamentum all died with them. So as we sit here 700 years later, what's the big deal and why were the Cathars so important? Well, the Cathars represent the last time a Gnostic movement openly challenged the archonic consensus reality in Europe. They recognized the world as a prison, identified the warden, and developed practical techniques for escape, and demonstrated through their deaths that they genuinely believed their teaching. Modern Christianity dismisses them as heretics who misunderstood scripture, but what if they understood perfectly? What if their recognition that this world is false creation managed by a lesser god is an accurate one, and the crusade against them was the archonic system defending itself against consciousness that had broken free? The Endora, whether literal fast unto death or symbolic severing of material attachment, represents the ultimate rejection of the game. Not fighting the system, not trying to reform it, but just recognizing that it's false and refusing to participate any longer. So if you want more on the Cathars and Gnostic martyrs, make sure to like the video, drop your thoughts in the comments below, make sure you click the link in my bio if you're interested in more information on mystery traditions like this, and follow for more deep dives next time.